I just want to begin by saying thanks, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Tonia Van Brunt. I am the program manager of Mindfulicity, and we are really excited to be discussing our topic, Keep It Kind, Navigating a New Normal, where we will be tackling the strategies and skills that each and every one of us can use to navigate how to manage the stress and uncertainty in the workplace these days with some kindness. So we're thrilled that you've joined us today for what will be a lively discussion, I'm sure. But before we begin, we may be gathering virtually, but it remains important to acknowledge the lands where we live, work, and play. In the spirit of reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge the traditional territories and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, and the Amskabi Piikani. We also acknowledge the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. We are all treaty people. And now, to kick it off, I would like to introduce our panelists today. So first of all, we're very pleased to have with us Lana Bentley, who is our Director of Program Strategy. Hi, Lana. Lana, a registered social worker and member of the Clinical Registry. Lana is YW Calgary's Director of Program Strategy. Prior to joining YW, Lana worked with Alberta Health Services, where she spent most of her time in eating disorders and dialectical behavior therapy before going on to manage the psychiatric inpatient unit of the and psychiatric emergency room at the Alberta Children's Hospital. Lana has been a part-time faculty member at Mount Royal University for over 10 years and more recently began teaching at the University of Calgary. Lana is Vice President of the Sharp Foundation and serves as a public member of the Alberta College Association of Opticians. Welcome, Lana. Tonia Rodgers. Tonia is the Manager of Counseling and Personal Development at YW Calgary. As a registered social worker with over 13 years of experience, Tonia began her career in children's services and later joined the nonprofit sector to focus on family violence. Tonia has been in leadership roles for the past 7 years, where she's been able to share her passion for strengths-based leadership and the prevention and treatment of family violence. Tonia holds a Bachelor of Social Work from Memorial University and received her Master of Social Work from Dalhousie University. Welcome, Tonia. So let's get into this. So first off, let's talk about what's on everybody's minds. And that is, as we head into the fall, and that's, I guess, no better word for it, but uncertainty. So there's uncertainty from what we can expect from our workplace, what it means when people are heading back to school and back to work, and what does that workplace look like? I mean, when we have back to office, perhaps, I don't know, with this COVID and what's happening, we don't know which way our workplaces are going to pivot, as well as back to school for some parents and some people who are actually going to school. I mean, it means back to a lot more stress, I think. So, with these different work structures and ongoing pressures and changing circumstances, I think it obviously adds to our anxiety and increased stress. So Lana and Tonia, I guess my first question to you is, what have you seen? And maybe we'll start with you, Lana, like what have you seen in the people you're talking to, and how can we navigate to this new normal?
Thank you to Tamara, and I'll try and be quick because I'm sure Tonia has a lot to say on this one. I think just to add to the list of scenarios that you described, there's also people who have continued to work business as usual, kind of, throughout the pandemic. I'm thinking about people working in healthcare particularly. I just think it's important to acknowledge that we've seen people who've had to work throughout the really difficult last 18 months that we've been through. And I imagine that the uncertainty there is probably how much longer is it going to be this way? So I think in terms of what we're seeing, I think what makes it just kind of scary is that for some types of uncertainty, you can still have the feeling that you can control or actively be making decisions to try and change your circumstances. But I think what's so wild about where we are now is you can't. You can control the immediate decisions that you make for your family, that you make in your household, and to a certain degree what you do with your time. But I think one of the toughest things that I'm hearing and seeing is folks saying, as much control as I can exercise in this current moment. You know, it's been a while and I know, I was going to say gathering around the TV, but I realized for some people on the call, they're like, what is that? So anyways, gathering around a device with a screen, and we're waiting to hear what decisions have been made on our behalf by other people. And that can be really scary when you're not sure what other people are going to say or put in place. And sometimes it can feel kind of scary because those decisions are being made for you. So even with that, Tamara, and I appreciate how much stress and pressure the last 18 months has brought about for people. Fundamentally, I do still believe that crisis equals opportunity, and that change is not always comfortable, but it's possible. So there are ways that we can adapt and be nimble and meet the moment as best we can. But I also want to validate that people are tuckered out. That's a fancy clinical term, but people are understandably tuckered out. And I understand that there's not a lot of gas in the tank. So for some folks, it does feel like they're kind of limping towards the finish line. So that's what I'm hearing and seeing. But ever the optimist, I still believe that there's ways we can manage this, even in the face of this difficulty.
Sure. Well, on that note, then I'll throw it over to you, Tonia. What's an example of a way we can control something or manage this? You know, do you have some thoughts on an example of what we could do?
Hi, Tamara. Thanks so much for having me. And yes, to echo Lana, I think it's really taken a toll on our mental health and wellness, especially the longer this goes on in the pandemic. And so emotions are really at the surface and really raw. And in terms of what we can do, I think there's a number of things that we can do. I think taking care of our health and wellness in general, and that can include, of course, many things. Also, having healthy boundaries, and I think that's important for us to talk about today as well, is how to do that, how to establish healthy boundaries, and the title of our talk today, Keeping It Kind. And so exercising empathy and having empathy for others and communicating that and being kind to each other.
Well, thanks, Tonia. On that note, I think we're going to kick it off with, we've kicked it off already, but we'll start with a video we want to show. And this video, I think, kind of epitomizes probably something that we've all felt in some shape or form, but I'm sure a lot of us can relate to this video. So if we can load up the video and take a look at that and see what we think.
This is crazy. Does my manager expect me to answer this right now? Don't they respect my personal time? If I don't respond, will that reflect badly on me? Why did I even look at this right now? Good luck getting back to sleep.
When you fail to negotiate and set clear boundaries with yourself and with others, you may feel frustrated, resentful, and insecure. It can impact your mental and physical well-being.
Thank you for playing that video. So I guess this leads into exactly what you were just mentioning, Tonia, and that is healthy boundaries. Clearly in the video, I think we've all felt this at some time. I know I have. I've either got, it maybe it wasn't at 3 a.m, although even as a leader, I've wanted to send them because I remembered something at 3 a.m. I think we all get a little stressed when we're the receiver of that email and suddenly do we have to answer that? Do we have to do something right away? So with that, I guess the first question I have is, we talk about healthy boundaries. Easier said, but Tonia, what is healthy boundaries? Or what are healthy boundaries? Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, healthy boundaries is really the key ingredient to having safe, respectful, healthy relationships in our lives. And when it comes to boundaries, we often don't know them until they're crossed. And then we're like, oh yeah, I need to set something here. I need to set a boundary. And earlier we were talking about how people are, transitioning back to the office. Some people are still working from home, and it's been quite the year in terms of having that, home life and work life mesh together. And so I'm sure people can think of different situations where they've had to create some healthy boundaries and communicate that. So that's exactly what it is. It's the limits that we set in our relationships, and how we communicate that with other people.
So why are healthy boundaries important? Like, why can Lana, why can't we just kind of merrily roll along here? Or how can setting these healthy boundaries and the importance of them, how can they help us to at least alleviate and manage our stress and anxiety?
Well, I think one of the things that's important is to understand what a healthy boundary looks like. And I'm a pretty visual person, and I'm going to ask everybody on the line to just indulge me with a visualization. So I want you to imagine that you're standing somewhere. Make it a positive place, but you're standing somewhere, and around you on the ground, there's an outline of a circle. Let's say that's a boundary. I think part of the challenge in setting healthy boundaries, Tamara, is that sometimes if you imagine that circle around you as providing protection, people would then jump to the logical conclusion that, well, the thicker that ring is around me, the more it protects me and the better my boundary. But the thing about boundaries is that they don't just have to keep stuff out, but they need to be able to let healthy, growth-enhancing things in. So a healthy boundary isn't one where that circle around you is a really thick, like almost like a thick tire from a monster truck. Think of it more like a dashed line. And it's healthy because it allows us to let things from our immediate surroundings or our immediate system out that are no longer helpful. And it allows us to let new things in, like information, feedback, new ideas, accepting the reality that is around us. So the reason that those healthy boundaries are important is because growth is something we're all doing minute to minute. I mean, if you think of the definition of mindfulness, it's about riveting yourself to the now, which is right now. Okay, it just happened. So the next now, right now. But the point being, when you have a healthy boundary, it allows you to rivet yourself to the now and be in this moment because there's freedom for things to come and go. Now, conversely, and I'm sure, Tonia, you've seen this in the department you oversee, we sometimes work with folks who, for whatever reason, they're not confident that it's okay to have any lines of support around them. And so their boundary is almost undetectable. And that's difficult because too much traffic can flow in and out. And if you just think about going to sleep at night, there's a difference between going to sleep on a quiet street versus one right off the Deerfoot, where it's really noisy. So too much traffic isn't good when we're managing our personal health. There does need to be some measure of protection. So a healthy boundary is working when there's a good flow in and out. Helpful things, unhelpful or outdated things get to leave the system, and healthy things come in. Does that answer the question, Tamara?
I think so, but maybe I'll throw it to Tonia to give it some examples of, in our lives, in our work lives, what are some healthy boundaries that we could maybe negotiate or commit to if we haven't already? And is it too late, Tonia, to do that when you're at work or at home?
I would say it's definitely not too late. I think of the video that you just showed, and that could be common. Your phone's going off after hours, or you're pulled in different directions, or you're asked to do things that you don't have capacity for right now, or you have too much on your plate and you're trying to juggle all of these things. And so I don't think it's too late. Like I said, sometimes we don't recognize it until the boundaries crossed and we're realizing we're in a bit of trouble here and we need to do something. And I think that's normal. That happens. It's okay. And so that could be a great example of saying no when you can. You don't have to always say yes to things, sticking with what your capacity is and what your limits are. And if it's something, if you're asked to do something at work and it's outside of your role, or you need to delegate it to somebody else, or you need to reschedule something, just communicating that effectively. And so, yeah, following those steps of how do you communicate that, and how do you negotiate that with people around you, and be clear around what your healthy boundaries are that you're trying to establish.
Right. Go ahead.
There's an important idea that I want to just drop here for folks when it comes to boundaries. There's an expression that I read in a book. You have the right to get your way some of the time. So
you mean not all the time?
I sure act like it some days. But the reason I share that, though, is because I think part of where folks can get into trouble in workplaces is working off the assumption, well, I shared my boundary and now you need to listen to it. We're talking about relationships. It's like minding a garden. And so in the example of the video, while certainly no one wants to get emails at 3 a.m. about something that can wait, to be fair, if I were the supervisor in a department and there had been an emergency overnight, and then I went in the next day and found out that I hadn't been notified, I might be bummed out. But that doesn't mean I want you to tell me, hey, I just ordered new paper for the printer. LOL, just thought you should know at 4 a.m. I think there's healthy balance in between, and there's negotiation. And I think everybody has the right to get their way some of the time. But in a workplace, I also think, to Tonia's point, when you communicate it, this is the dashed line. There has to be some give and take. And that comes from a place of wanting to invest in having good workplace relationships. So not just getting your own way.
Right. So in that example, let's keep going on this example here that we've just shown. What could the person have done then when they're just getting frustrated and, they get this barrage and it keeps going on, and they're just, every week they're just getting more and more frustrated. What do you say, Lana? A buildup leads to blow up, and finally you don't want them losing it on their supervisor, right? Which it could be very close to the surface these days. So when you do that, can maybe walk us through, like, what do you think that person could do? Is there like some steps to asking how that you want to negotiate this boundary with your manager?
Yeah, I mean, so going back to that point about, we sometimes don't know what our boundaries are until they've been crossed. Guess what? Other people may not know what our boundary is until we tell them. So I think, to be fair, I totally understand that sometimes there is a perceived power differential, which does influence how comfortable we are giving somebody else feedback. So how do you do that? Mindfulness is about being in the current moment without judgment. And so there's a difference between going into your boss's office and saying, you're super disrespectful, sending me these messages, versus, could I talk to you for a moment? Is now a good time for us to have a conversation where I could have your undivided attention? And then speaking to what you've noticed and divorcing yourself from judgmental language. To be fair, you may experience a behavior as disrespectful, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's where the other person is coming from. And unfortunately, the longer we let a behavior persist, the more people just think it's okay because they haven't been told otherwise. So I think you have to use your mindfulness skills and just the facts and be cool.
Right. And Tonia, with that, I guess what Lana was talking about can sometimes be easier said than done, right? When you have, like you said, Lana, the power differential. So Tonia, what are some challenges in the workplace that can get in the way of negotiating healthy boundaries? Because I'm sure we've all have some experience in that, and just something that we can all relate to as we try to do this, and just how we get around it.
Yeah, I immediately think of when we react versus respond, and getting back to that, emotions are, on the surface and they're high, and we're dealing with a lot. Stress is really high. And so if we react based on our feelings or on our emotion, and it's driven by that, it's easy to get in a bit of trouble there. Whereas if the difference between reacting and responding is responding, you've probably had that stop, pause, breathe moment. You've probably used some skills around that and really thought through how you're going to respond and how you're going to articulate yourself, sticking with the asks and keeping it simple and straightforward. Like Lana said, taking the judgment language out of it, but just sticking to clearly, identifying what is the issue, what's the problem that I'm seeing, and just being curious about, what could be happening, and then creating an ask and negotiating that with somebody and being really clear. Communication and clear communication is key, and keeping it simple.
Sure. So what I'm hearing then is that when we make these asks of, as we set these boundaries and make the asks around what we'd like to see happen with someone, I think not only being clear, sticking to the facts, addressing the problem, and I guess also an acknowledgement and appreciation, like Lana said, and what you said, Tonia, is appreciating the other person's perspective and where they're coming from, that what you thought maybe what they were thinking might not necessarily be the perspective that they had. And maybe in this case with the phone calls or the texts, like I was saying, as a leader, maybe I was just like, I'm sorry, I was just, I do that because I didn't expect you to answer. I just throw that out there because I'm awake and it's on my mind and I got to get it down on a text or in my email. Full well not even appreciating that the employee is all stressed that they have to answer immediately. So I guess just appreciating other people's perspectives. And I think as we do this, it's also, it comes down to keeping it kind, like you said, and really being thoughtful of being in the other person's shoes. So I think that's what we call empathy. And I know that that's quite a word that a lot of people are using these days, and that's being applied to the workplace. There seems to be lots of examples of incivility, whether it's in online and social media, but even, in the gas lineup and at work and some of these things, people are pretty short. So I guess when we talk about keeping it kind when we're navigating this new normal, first of all, I guess we should ask ourselves, what is empathy, Tonia? And why is it so important to building our psychologically safe workplaces?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Empathy is really, being in tune to the other person's perspective. It's listening to what they're going through. You're not jumping to, giving them advice or solving their problem or necessarily having an answer, but it's just, appreciating that, everyone is navigating this space right now, this time of uncertainty, the best way they can. And people have different experiences and feelings and things that they're struggling with. And so just slowing that down, I guess, is what I think about. I think about just trying not to try to remove the judgment from it and just listen to where people are coming from and empathizing with that and communicating with respect.
So Lana, why is empathy seems like it's a no-brainer, but why is it so hard when emotions are running high?
Well, before I forget this,
yes,
just for people on the line, I'm just going to give you one little homework experiment for your communication this week. Is I want you, when you're tempted to if you're setting a boundary with somebody, I want you to challenge yourself to let go of the words always and never and substitute sometimes and see how that feels. So I'm just going to put that challenge out there. Now, talking about empathy, I think having taught at Mount Royal for over 10 years, and thank you for not being too specific about how much over the 10. But I will say the toughest skill to teach folks who are going into counseling or helping professions is empathy. It's tough to teach, it's tough to grade, it's tough to assess. But the reason empathy is so important, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of brain science, but I'm thinking of the work we do at YW. We do a lot of work with folks who are trying to unlearn violent behavior. And one of the core things we teach them, gang, is empathy. And the reason is because empathy and I'm going to use my soft language here, but empathy is when your brain gives a hug to the experience of a stranger or somebody else. And here's the thing, is when your brain is giving somebody else's experience a hug, it makes it really tough to hit or to hurt. So when we're empathizing, it's your brain's natural way of embracing somebody else. And if you're embracing somebody else, that means you're probably not trying to lash out at them at the same time. So the reason empathy is so mission critical for good relationships at work is because it's your brain's way of saying, come here. And the other way that I describe it is, imagine if you're having a holiday dinner party and your dining room table normally seats 6, and let's be honest, you don't want to have that many people over for dinner. It's a lot of work. But let's say you want to have a really big celebration. You know what you're going to need to do in that living room or that dining room is you're going to need to move your furniture out so you can fill it with other chairs and seats to welcome others. And that's what empathy does, is it temporarily says, let's move your stuff out of the way to make way and space for others. That's why it's so essential to have empathy. It's making space. It's giving your brain, giving a hug to somebody else's experience. And that's the building block of understanding relationships. Even if you don't agree, imagine how much better that interaction is going to be if momentarily you move out that dining room table that you had to have and you literally welcome in others. Does that make sense, Tamara and Tonia?
Well, I know that makes sense, that I've got to change how I do my my dinner parties. I haven't written anything. Kind of indicative maybe of how I think about things. No, I think that's an awesome, it's a great visual, because I think in the heat of the moment, when we're stressed, when we have anxiety, that can be really hard. And so maybe Tonia, maybe give us some examples of why it's hard for us. Like, is there some things that get in the way? Like, I can think of one sometimes that I see with people, not saying any names, if you think you're always right, where it's just kind of like, I'm not really, I don't need to make room because this is all about me, right? Type of thing. So there must be other, kind of challenges that get in the way when you're trying to be empathetic to things.
Absolutely. I wanted to highlight the challenge when our own mental health and wellness has taken a toll, and we don't feel like we have a lot in the tank or a lot to give. It can be really hard to then empathize with other people or be kind to other people when we're not doing well ourselves. I noticed in the chat there, Sue had mentioned, like, can there be too much empathy, or is there a boundary there? And it's like, you can only give what you have. So I think it's starting with the inside out. I mean, certainly you want to be kind to others and have that capacity, but you really have to start with your own mental health and your own wellness and your own self and taking care of that, and practicing all the skills and tools that's available, and reaching out to help, and it being an ongoing investment in our own mental health and wellness, because if you're trying to give what you don't have, there's no gas in the tank there. So
sure, no, that makes total sense. So with that, we talk about skills we can use today. That's what we've been talking about in this webinar. So if we're going to start today, I am going to practice empathy somewhere in my day. What are the two most important things around this? Like, what do we have to think of? What can help us trigger what we have to do? Because as much as we like to think it comes naturally, like I said, when it's stress and anxiety, it maybe isn't as natural as we would like. Maybe Lana, do you want to go with that question?
Well, I think what makes it hard, and I want to honor this, is I think for some folks, it feels like we can't have a both and. So how can I honor and notice my own emotions while making space for others? But I want to be clear. Sympathy is what I feel for you. Empathy is what I feel as you. So empathy does not require us to do anything other than demonstrate, I hear ya. One of the easiest empathic statements that you can make is, so you feel blank because blank. So you feel frustrated because I was late. So you feel disappointed because I didn't approve your vacation time off request. Notice, there's no call for me to necessarily change my course of action. But what I'm doing is letting the other person know, I hear ya. And the challenge is that when we fail to demonstrate empathy, the other person probably isn't saying to themselves, oh, geez, I guess Tamara's just having a hard time empathizing with me. What you're more likely to see is she not listening? Does she not get where I'm coming from? Does she not hear me? Does she not know how hard I work? And when you empathize, it actually lets the other person take a deep breath and know, you know what? I don't need to escalate anymore because Tamara does understand where I'm coming from. When we don't empathize, it can invite the other party to think, so you're not getting it, I'm going to help you get it. And that's where scenarios can go from 0 to 60, right? And then that's when you hear people saying, you always do this and you never do this. Reaching for the past, borrowing trouble from the future versus sitting in the now. So I think to your point, when it comes to empathizing, I want to be clear, it's what I feel as you. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a call for action to you to surrender your boundaries. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about empathy. It's a skill, and it also has the outcome of de-escalating difficult situations. In order to empathize, though, people like Tonia's going to say, Lana, you've already said this 4 times today, but in order for you to accurately be with that person and imagine the world as they do, you're going to have to cut out that noise. Press pause, take a breath. Are you giving this situation your undivided attention? And are you divorcing yourself from judgment? So don't think, man, this person sure is ungrateful. I approved their time off request 3 years ago. What do they want from me now? Let go of the judgments and just reflect back. So you feel disappointed because I know you really wanted to get away, and I've declined your form. So I don't know if that helps, Tamara, but I think that you have to be right here, right now in order to do the skill.
Well, you know what, with that, I think that's a great lead into our next video that we're going to show, coming from our Mindfulicity training. And that really is addressing a scenario in the workplace around the importance of empathy. So we'll play that one now, and we can just have a quick chat after to talk about what we're seeing and if that reflects what we were talking about. When I bring up this issue, I sure hope my manager gets where I'm coming from. Do you have a moment to chat about an issue I'm facing?
Okay. Remember to show you care with empathy. Concentrate, listen without judgment, and avoid solving the problem. Recognize their perspective and the emotions they feel. Then express the feelings that you see and hear from them. Okay, I'm listening.
I have to chase down a lot of information from the team for the quarterly report, and it's taking a lot of work.
Body language. Check understanding with empathy statements. So you feel frustrated because you're having to work extra hours to get it done.
Yes, and when I address the issue with them, they're still not respecting the deadlines I set.
I want to make sure I'm getting this right. You're feeling disrespected because they're failing to meet your deadlines?
Exactly.
I understand how upset you must feel.
Thank you for making the time for this conversation. I would like to share some ideas I have on how to fix this. So, what do we think about this, ladies? Like that, I think to me that speaks to all that you were mentioning, Lana, in the fact that, you know what,
you've got to really be present in the moment. And that manager seemed to be really present, putting the laptop down and really leaning in and listening. Tonia, what else did you notice in the video?
Yeah, they really thought about it, because, you know, they could have been busy. They're distracted, they're doing something, and really thought about, okay, you know, let's give them my undivided attention and listen to what's going on, and just acknowledging their feelings and identifying it. And it isn't, like we said, it isn't about jumping to the answer or necessarily giving them, you know, what they want or what they're asking, but it's just being there and being present, and listening, and using the ABCs of empathy.
Yeah, and Lana, with that, you know, the ABCs and actually the actual communicating like that, the fact is that you can be empathic in your mind, but if you're not actually expressing it in those actions, right, then it's really all for naught.
Yeah, and you know, I think in the spirit of inclusion, we realize that there's different communication styles. Some people are highly verbal, and making an empathy statement would be the best way they could communicate it. For other folks, it's body language, where you're mirroring the energy of the other person, and that's also effective. And sometimes there's nonverbal prompts that can let somebody know that we're connecting with their experience. You know what I mean? Like, so there's different ways that you can communicate empathy. And I think we're now learning a lot more about how people communicate, because they might be differently, because they might be neurodivergent, for example, or they might speak a different language. And so their ability to communicate empathy might be coming in a way that looks, sounds, or feels a bit different. But there's more than one way to communicate empathy, I think is the most important thing. It can be through your gestures, through your body language, or through your words, and all are helpful. And, you know, I think the way that I would frame it is the most effective way of communicating empathy is whatever the other person understands.
Shrugging shoulders. See, I'm doing it right now. See, I was like, yeah, I agree.
You just did all of it.
that actually leads me to another challenge. And Tonia, you know, maybe you can comment on this, is that here we are in a virtual world, and hopefully it's not always going to be this way, that we're going to have at least maybe a bit of a hybrid. But if we can't see people in 3D, trying to communicate and read those body cues and the body language seems to be even harder.
It is harder. We definitely see that in counseling too, because even the you know, services that we're offering can be are virtual often, and so it's definitely a challenge, and it's something for us to always, you know, keep in mind. And when you're connecting with somebody virtually, is you can still check in with them and still listen and still ask questions about how they're feeling and how they're doing and what they're thinking.
Yeah, and I think, like you've talked about these empathy statements. I think we heard it in the video. You know, there's the manager is testing it, right? Saying, so you feel frustrated because your deadlines aren't being met. And I think the hardest thing as leaders is we want to come in, you know, somebody's coming in to our door with a problem. We want to have a solution, right? So we're ready to jump in, and we better solve it, because I was hired because I have the answers. That's why I'm here. And I think that's the hardest thing for leaders, is to stop and not solve it for them, and actually just listen, and almost like sit on your hands. And you can't, you know, you don't need to have the answers, which can be really, really hard when you've been kind of, you know, conditioned to have to feel like you always have the answers. Does that make sense, Lana?
Yeah, and I think what's been really, really cool, and I know a lot of workplaces are going through this right now, is having conversations about just the diversity of styles within your team. And to your point, Tamara, I think that, at least for me, I always understood leadership to be one where, you know, it's a very traditional model, and taking the time to listen and connect without a solution necessarily attached to it wasn't always a part of those experiences. So I think what I hear you encouraging today is what if sometimes it's about solutions, if that's what you're hearing the person ask for from you, but what if sometimes it's about connection and feeling understood? We know that when we use mindfulness skills, we have a better chance of identifying whether we do need to stay calm and surf the urge to act so we don't make it worse versus problem solve. It's really hard to know what a situation requires, though, if you're really busy and not necessarily taking the time to say, stop, pause, breathe, what's needed. And I think that quite often, to your point, Tamara, people rush to action in a desire to be helpful before they fully understand A, the situation, and B, what the other person is actually asking for from you. In a non-work environment, when my partner gives me advice about how to do something, and it's like, no, I wasn't asking you for that. Like now that introduces a whole other dynamic. Sometimes I really do just need somebody to listen, reflect back what I'm saying. And then it's not even about, even if there is a solution to be found, Tamara, I might be capable of doing that. I just need you to help me process it. So to your point, we do need to surf the urge to rush to what we perceive as being the appropriate next step.
Yeah, for sure. And so we talk about this, and I think at the core of all of our counseling, at the core of our mindfulicity training is mindfulness. So why is that so important? I think a lot of people think maybe it's this kind of airy fairy thing, like what is this, and why can we use it practically in the workplace, in our day-to-day lives? Lana?
Well, first of all, I think that mindfulness is gaining the momentum that it is, Tamara, because we actually have really good research and evidence showing that this is mission critical for brain health. And it actually is an approach that is now being understood to improve productivity, to improve the quality of relationships and physical and mental health. I think the challenge with mindfulness, though, is that, okay, Tamara, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I just want to share this one story. You've heard it. It's about my cousin who is a professional dancer.
Right.
And she came home for Christmas and I was like, what's the most difficult move to do in dance? Not this, folks, but I said, is it the windmill kicks or the spinning or the jazz hands? And she said, no, it's standing still because the body wants to move. Our brains want to think, and they sometimes end up going back to things that have already happened or imagining scenarios that we think could happen. Mindfulness is very simple in that it asks us to be in this moment, but that can be very challenging given everything we have going on around us. And particularly since in work environments, Tamara, we've been told to multitask versus single task. Mindfulness helps us do things more richly and more fully. And I think we can all imagine the benefits to that in complex workplace environments.
Well, and on that note, then, thank you, Lana. I guess, Tonia, the final question I have, we'll open it up to questions after this. We have a few more minutes. But Tonia, how can we be more mindful in our approach to all the things that are going to come at us this fall? Can you give us some ideas, some strategies?
Yeah, and there's lots of different exercises and mindfulness strategies that you can incorporate into your day to day. It is about being more present and slowing things down and being in the moment. And like Lana said earlier, resisting the urge to think backwards or think, trying to predict where this is going to go, what the next few months is going to look like. It's going to be quite the challenge. It's pretty uncertain right now. So I think just staying in the moment and staying in the present and what's happening right now. What do we need to deal with right now? Not next month or the unknown, trying to guess the unknown. And yeah, any kind of learning or like the Mindfulicity program, there's tons of things out there that you can put your hands on and incorporate into your day-to-day life to be more mindful and to be more in the present. And when we're more present, we know that we have a better ability to manage those emotions that we talked about earlier, all of that stress and all those raw emotions that are bubbling up on the surface. If we're doing what we can to stay in the present and be more mindful, we can control that better in ourselves.
Awesome. So with that, I just was going to open it up to the attendees. If anybody had any questions they wanted to ask of Tonia and Lana, feel free to type them in the chat, we can go from there. And if not, I've got some questions around this. Is that so mindfulness, as a practice, I think people think that it has to be something so formal, but I mean, what are some easy ways to be mindful? I mean, what can we do, Tonia? Like, what would you do today?
Yeah, well, the single tasking that Lana referred to is just doing one thing well at a time, and focusing on that. And it could be your lunch when you stop and take a break and eat lunch. Are you taking a break and eating your lunch and focusing on just that, or are you still kind of all over the place and thinking everywhere? And I'm sure we've all had those experiences where you drove somewhere or you ate something and now you're trying to remember, did I did I have one? Like,
or not even remember. It's been a while, but even remembering that I drove to work and you forgot you forgot the route that you even just were doing to get there because your mind's so somewhere else. No, I totally get it. And I think, and another thing for me is also I have a tendency to, what do they call it? Doom scrolling, where you can sit there and, if you want to, you can go down a rabbit hole of looking at, whether it's Twitter, whether it's the news, there's lots of things. Not that, I am a bit of a news junkie, but just really sometimes putting it down, putting it away and saying, I'm not going to do this, before I go to sleep, because it's just going to keep the mind racing, and just focusing on a great sleep hygiene routine, right? I think is another example of just being mindful there in the moment to stop yourself. We had a question in the panel. It says, how do you get in the practice of giving brain hugs, Lana? Is there a device we can buy for that?
Well, speaking of boundaries, don't wrap your arms around a colleague's head.
Yeah.
that might not go over so well.
Or at least ask them before you do.
Yeah, please do. I think that what this requires, and it goes back to that example of, I said that the toughest move to master in dancing is stillness, is first of all, you need to make a commitment that you are going to find the moments when, before you rush to judgment, you stop and ask yourself some investigative questions. I think when it comes to empathy, what makes it hard to empathize is if we don't want to imagine that somebody else might have a differing opinion that's correct, so the desire to be right. B, worrying that if we empathize with the other person, it's like we're giving in or diminishing ourselves. And then finally, if you don't like them, and you're sort of like, ew, I don't want to imagine what Jim thinks.
Let's face it, like family's one thing, but at work, we might, we have to like these people, and we might not necessarily like all of them necessarily, right?
Yeah. So what I would invite folks to do is, as an experiment, is seek out folks who you typically don't agree with. And this comes from the world of exposure therapy, but make a decision, set an intention to seek out opinions that you don't normally agree with, and then mentally just do an imagination experiment before you can verbalize it. If that's beyond what you're capable of now, just push yourself to imagine where might that person be coming from. And, rather than assuming you know the answers, just notice, oh, I'm having this thought. I'm having this emotion in reaction to what that person is saying. But it takes a mental intention, labeling thoughts as thoughts, emotions as emotions, and being kind to yourself. That empathy is not always easy to do. It's a process, not a single event.
So one of the things I keep hearing throughout this is it starts with us, right? I think we have to take some personal accountability rather than always being focused on what everybody else is doing. I mean, there's lots of great things we can do. Is that kind of the essence of what we're talking about?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think, in the spirit of time, I think we're going to draw this to a close. Thank you, Tonia, Lana, for such an engaging and useful discussion. And I think we all agree that, like I said, there's some key steps that we all can take to feel more psychologically safe at work and at home. And I know I'll be thinking about my boundaries and some that I think I have to renegotiate, and whether I've set them out clearly for others around me. And like I said, it's not just at work, but even at home. So I'll also be thinking about how I do this and how I'm going to go at it, and whether I've been empathic in my approach, especially when I'm stressed, and really taking that step to pause and breathe, like you mentioned. So I know that, as we said, a psychologically safe workplace starts with all of us in our own actions. So I would invite you, as you leave today, to consider, how are you showing up at work and at home? And what are you doing to take care of your own mental wellness and the well-being of others in your team and in your life? We've heard that the primary barriers to successfully addressing mental health, especially in the workplace, is a lack of policies and resources, lack of awareness, and a lack of trust. Well, guess what? We can help you with that. So we have a program. It's called Mindfulicity, and it's a training program that consists of 10 bite-sized, engaging online skill building modules to help build psychological safety in the workplace and help your employees. It helps them mindfully gain and apply the day-to-day skills that we're talking about to manage stress and build conflict management skills in the workplace every day. Stuff you can use this next hour, which is the best part of it all, is that there's real easy takeaways that come with it. And by investing in this training, as an employer, you're laying the groundwork for that safe and secure space where all employees can lead their best lives at work and at home, wherever work may be. So if you're interested in learning more and how you can bring this program to your organization or to your team, or if you want to tell those who are the decision makers in your organization, please visit mindfulicity.ca. Please contact us and look in the chat and the email so we can get in touch. And I thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar as we tackle some more of these issues. We've got some strategies, like I said, takeaways we can use every day. So once again, thank you. Have a great day. Make some healthy boundaries and be kind to one another. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.